I think March 14 is a great idea. I think it's when communities see eye to eye, they wake up from the civil war. It's political parties that are legitimate, not alternative or civil society. There are good, honest Lebanese on the streets. They're calling on the Syrians to leave. I think of that as a moment to champion.
I think of what you just said as a complete, in my mind, respectfully, misrepresentation.
You were about to curse.
No, what happened? First of all, in March 14th, there were, I was there, by the way. There were very, very few Shia there. The bulk of the people who were there were Sunnis, Christians, and Druze. So it's not true that all communities were there. One big community was not there. And eventually the political force that broke the back of March 14 came from that community. In fact, not only it came from that community, but in the last elections, may I remind you, that out of 562,000 Shia voters who actually voted, 95% of these people, 95%, I have the numbers, Nadim, 95% voted for Hezbollah. And so that's one thing. Yeah. Of course, the same community then provided the same force that broke the back of another beautiful moment, the revolution.
October 17th.
October 17th. I was there too. So first of all, it's not exact to say the Lebanese communities came together. One big community was not there. That's one. Two, the fact that Samir Jaja was in prison and the Lebanese forces were on the streets calling for the Syrians to leave, because they knew that as long as the Syrians were there, Jaja will still remain in prison. That does not mean that these people were not acting as Christians with a very defined communal identity, just because they happen to basically sit side by side by the Jumblati PSP. So what happened was not, this is where I find myself in a crusade against romanticism. 14th of March, first of all, out of the four big community, one was not there. Second, the people who were there did not cease operating as Christians when they were Lebanese forces or Aounist. They did not cease to operate as Druze when they were there as supporters of Ali Jumblat. They did not cease operating as Sunnis when they were there, driven by their anger at the loss of Rafiq Hariri. So that doesn't mean that was a day where communitarism disappeared, and then the bad people came later on and they pushed us back to the confessional divide line. What happened in 2005 was that the different communities, three of the four big communities, had a common enemy, which was the Syrians, and they basically so there was a nexus between these communities. That doesn't mean that day. You see what I mean?
Before you talk, I'll just say
disappeared.
Okay, so since I wasn't allowed to interject something,
okay,
I'll do it now.
Please. Yeah, go.
I think you're wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. And the March 14 you experienced is not the March 14 I saw. Maybe we were on the same plaza at the same time, but I think you're looking for something.
No, I think... no, okay. Fair enough.
You didn't let me.
Fair enough.
MTV, you did this all the time. I was very nice to you too.
Fair enough.
Every Shia I know from March 14 is still with me. And every Hezbollah member that did not show up in March 14, who are now speaking the language of October 17, I think they matter, and they're Shia. Whether or not it's 5% or 95% of the community, there were Shia on the streets of Beirut. The same patriotic party, 8 months after March 14, joins Hezbollah. That's not because they're bad Christians. It's not because they're letting go of their community. It's bad politics. Any team that decides to work alongside Hezbollah from 2006 onwards, all of them are damaged goods. And they're damaged, I think you're right. You said the political force that ended March 14? I would say it's more security force. I don't think Hezbollah went through politics. It went through violence. But I don't subscribe to this way of looking at Lebanon. The Shia were not there. No, they were there.
Some Shia were there.
A lot of Shia were there.
Azizi, what happened a week before March 14th?
March 8th.
And how many Shia were there in comparison to how many Shia?
500,000.
Half a million. Yeah. So that's the large majority of the community.
I completely
agree. You can very well look at a few Christian leftists who supported.
Can I rescue you?
Let me finish those. Yeah, then
You can.
No, I want to rescue him.
You can very well look at a few Christian leftists who in the 1960s and the 1970s supported the Palestinian cause, and they were ready to go all the way in support of the Palestinian cause. That does not deny the fact that the bulk of the Christian community at the time did not support the Palestinian cause.
Right.
Okay. Same thing, you can look at somebody I respect a lot, like let's say Luqman Salim, may he rest in peace, who was there in March 14 and others, and they were there, and I respect them, but that does not deny the fact that the large bulk of the Shia community was not there. In fact, it was in the quite opposite direction. That's a fact. See, this is where I begin my crusade against changing facts for the sake of political romance.
This is not romance versus facts. You're discrediting the Shia that showed up because they're not enough.
I'm not discrediting anyone. I'm telling you the bulk of the community was not there because that community has different political choices stemming from its own identity. I'm not discrediting anyone. I'm just describing. Yes.
You're right. But so what? So what? 90
I feel the lady should join us.
No, she's staying there. Trust me, you don't want to. We can't see you. Are there people still there?
I think you should.
Oh, good. Everyone's still there?
But
worst case scenario, they all leave and we're like, there's no one at the end.
What if? And we run out of wine.
No, there's enough wine.
There's enough wine.
Essentializing communities, to me, is not the right way of looking at our problems. And I don't think the thousands of Shia that showed up on March 14, or the tens of thousands or more that were there on October 18, 2019, I think of them as Lebanese and deserving of everything we're talking about.
Did I say they were not?
You're saying things that I think essentialize the Christians of Lebanon.
If I tell you that 95% of the Shia voters in 2022 voted for Hezbollah and Abel, and I show you with numbers.
Yeah.
Am I essentializing or am I just citing numbers? According to you, numbers do not matter when we're talking political analysis?
One more thing, then you can talk. One more thing. No, you're right. You're right. Something like 75% of the Christians of Lebanon voted for the worst president in Lebanese history.
Bleep.
Am I gonna blame them for? No. I have to get this part down. You want out. You're looking for ways to get out. That's what you're doing.
You're not listening to me.
I'm listening. I've listened to you. I'm listening very carefully.
No, you're not listening to me. I'm telling you, choosing over and over and over again one political side. You can't just say, well, I have a couple of friends who chose
the other side. Can I settle this?
And then, they do not matter. Numbers matter.
Ronnie, let me help.
Balances of power matter. Correlations of force. That's basic political analysis. You cannot just forget about that because you don't like that. Most of the Shia identify currently with Hezbollah and Harakat Amal. We cannot deny that just because a few of our liberal Shia friends joins us in the streets of March 14. And so that's a fact. Now the question is, okay, what do we do about that? Can we just continue with a country in which you have different communities with different and radical different political choices, and that I'm afraid that could lead us another 20 years or 30 years into yet another civil war? Do we say, okay, you know what, if this is what's going to happen, perhaps we should consider, first we should ask ourselves, should we continue as a unified country, even if that means another round of civil war every 20 or 30 years? Or if we can't continue as a civil country, should we at least consider changing the political regime so this doesn't happen? I think these are legitimate questions to ask. What is not legitimate is basically saying, just because you had in 1943 a bunch of Christians who were Arab nationalists, forgetting about the fact that most Christians were not. Just because a bunch of Christians were in the 60s pro-Arafat or pro-Palestinian cause, forgetting about the fact that most Christians were not. That's wrong political analysis. I'm not saying, if you want to do it, go ahead and do it. But I'm telling you that from an empirical perspective, forgetting about the fact that an overwhelming majority of the Shia currently support Hezbollah and Harakat Amal, and asking ourselves, what can we do about that? Politically, intellectually, that's unconvincing to me.
Everything you said is actually true. I'm not disagreeing with the facts. I'm disagreeing about what to do with them. Nadim.
I still think we're beating around the subject, but let me solve the numbers issue. 97.6%.
A little closer.
97.6. You can hear 97.6% of Syrians voted for Bashar al-Assad 6 months before the revolution. Does this mean that 97.6% of Syrians were pro-Assad and then suddenly they woke up and they're not? No, it means that there is a political party that has hegemony, that has hijacked a whole community, and that community is the first victim. Yani the Shia of Lebanon are the first victims of Hezbollah. It's their children who are being indoctrinated when they are kids. It's their young men who are being sent to die in Iraq and in Syria and in Yemen. It's they are the ones who are the first victims of Hezbollah. You're portraying us as the victims, the Christians. Look, I'm wearing a noon cufflink. Whereas I see that we are all victims of a fascist organization, criminal fascist organization, that is part of a regional phenomenon that is part of a broad Shiite revival that started in the 50s, and if you want to, and that has its worst manifestation here, and we're all victims. We have to find a way of getting rid of that mode of life that we are in, because separation will not resolve it. And the example I give is Gaza. And people, if Hamas is in Gaza and the PLO is in the West Bank with all the international support and all that, does it solve things? No, because there's contagion, and now you have the whole place is unsettled. I don't think anyone can live. That's why I'm more extremist than you are. And you're saying the Shias love Hezbollah, Mabruk alayhon, let's separate and we live alone. Anna, I think we can't. Not even. There's no way we can't. We can. And they are the first victims. And the biggest victims in this whole thing are the Sunnis, and regionally, it's Sunnis who don't have leadership in Lebanon, Sunni cities that were destroyed in Syria. Most of the displaced people and the ethnically cleansed areas in Syria and Iraq are Sunni. We're all victims of a certain mode of politics represented by the trinity of Bashar al-Assad, Hassan Nasrallah, Iran, and Russia. And Ukraine is suffering the same thing. So I see it as a bigger problem that we all suffer from, rather than as me and or a small section, that we can separate. And even if we do see it like that, you cannot isolate yourself from such a bad actor, because they will find a way of involving you. And if they start a war with Israel, how can you avoid it?
Most of the Syrian people voted for Assad.
97.6%.
Okay, I know that. The difference is the elections in Lebanon, while imperfect, cannot be compared to elections in Syria. We know that elections in Syria are ridiculous. We know that they do not represent the population, but it's simply not true. So this is where your comparison does not stand at all. It's simply not true that elections in Lebanon are as dishonest and as unrepresentative as elections in Syria. So while we can disagree that Assad does not represent 96% of the population simply because he got 96% of the vote, we cannot disagree that the Shia duo actually represents a majority of the Shia because they got 95%. Your comparison is very problematic. It's simply not true that Samir Jaja is not extremely popular in Psharri. That's not true.
In Psharri?
It's simply not true that Walid Jumblat is not extremely popular in the mountains.
And Jaja is more popular in Akkar than anybody else.
The point is, your comparison, you're drawing a comparison between an unperfect election, such as the one going on in Lebanon, and a completely joke of an election, such as the one going on in Syria. Yeah. And from an intellectual perspective, from a comparative perspective, that's problematic. This is one thing. The other thing that you're basically suggesting. We are all victims here. And well, I mean, it's different because in the sense that even if the situation is bad for everyone, we are vulnerable toward that situation in a very, very different way.
We are doing the best. We are the best. We have leadership. We have disagreements. We are preserving our own culture. We are far better off as Christians, if you want, than the Shias who are hijacked by Hezbollah.
They're not hijacked. They're voting for these people. They are not. So the description.
The voting system doesn't allow them to vote anywhere else.
They were people from the opposition who basically participated in and they got less than 5%.
Let me give you one example.
The idea of hijacking for me is problematic. This is where facts do not matter.
Okay. Let me give you one example.
Yeah.
You and me, if we stand for elections here, you form a list, I form a list, the audience hopefully will be split sort of either towards you or towards me. One of us will win, and there will be a small minority in the middle who will swing the vote. But if you and I are forced, like Amal and Hezbollah are forced, to form one single list, nobody has then we have total hegemony. Nobody can stand against us. And you put a donkey on our list, he will win, because we represent the two sides that are forced to stand together. One has been forced to stand with the other through a massacre that lasted 3 years in not far from here in Qim al-Tufah and in. Through the first assassinations were of the Shia leadership of Amal, and the communist Shia leadership and the nationalist Shia leadership, and that's fact too. You have a criminal organization that has achieved hegemony over a community through that kind of behavior, through assassinations, through wars, through etc., and then used that monopoly to recruit feeble-minded Christians on one side to join them, who joined them for political purposes.
So the Christians who joined them were feeble-minded, but the
Aunists who joined Hezbollah
them were just victims?
Yes, they were also victims.
Okay, wow. Quite interesting.
Let me steer it back.
Do you see what you just did? Because you're Christian and you feel very much your Christian identity. When you're talking about the Christians, they are feeble-minded because a few of them joined Hezbollah. But we're talking about the tens of thousands of Shia who are voting for Hezbollah. They're not feeble-minded. They're just victims. Does that make sense to you?
No, I'm being partisan. I'm anti-Aun.
You're being politically correct.
I'm being partisan.